Hello and welcome to our tutorial. So here we're going to create a piece of video not too dissimilar to this. That last little jump at the end is not great, but the preceding couple of seconds aren't bad. So we're going to take a 3D character and place it in a piece of 2D video. We're going to have a look at how to do that. And we're going to do it all in Blender. So, with no further ado, let's open up my file here. Okay, so I'm going to so this is where I've made it, the video that you've just seen. So we will go back to our starting point here. So this is not going to be a tutorial about how to do 3D animation or any such business. We're going to just take a 3D character, we'll go through the tracking process in the 2D video, and then how to integrate one into the other. So our starting point for this is a character that is already made, has a skeleton created and is rigged and then animated. So this is sort of the point at which we're beginning. And there's lots of other videos on the YouTube channel to show you how to do all of that to get to this point. So just a tiny piece of housekeeping before we start. So I'm going to take that object there and delete it, and we'll just leave it like that. So I'm going to go up here in Blender and go to motion tracking, and I'm going to open up my piece of video, which is on my desktop. So this is a piece of video that was shot on a DJI Spark. Now this piece of, or this blend file was set to render between these frames here, 150 and 250. Now just rather than boring you with scrolling through the video, I know it's going to start around frame 820. That's going to be my endpoint, my starting point, and I'm going to go to about frame 940. So roughly that will be my my point. So let's have a little play of that. So this is the video playing here. So that's it. That's it, kind of playing through or scrubbing through. So what we need to do is we need to put in tracking points. So there's a couple of things we need to be kind of cognizant of when we're doing that. And the first one is this, that unlike when in the previous tutorial we looked at how to do this in Fusion, when in the Blender tracking, if an object passes off the screen, while you can still use that tracking point, it's not so straightforward. So we're actually going to track this backwards. We're going to start at the end frame and add our tracking points in here, and then we'll be guaranteed that those points are in the footage at the very beginning, rather than selecting a point here, for example, and have that pass out of shot, and that'll make the tracking that bit more difficult. Now, in order to track in Blender, you need to have 8 tracking points. And I'm going to place the robot here on the kind of ground plane of the beach. So I want those tracking points to be also on that plane, so that we know we're kind of tracking this flat area. So let's start with sort of the back of the beach here. So to add a tracking point, I'm going to hold down the Control key and left click. So there's one there, and we can see it in close-up over here in our preview window. So we'll zoom in a little bit more and go S to make that area a bit bigger, and go G and place it on top. So that's point 1. We'll use this point here. That's number 2. We'll scale up our search area a little bit. Then we'll move here. We'll click on this guy. That's number 3, and what we're looking for is sort of high contrast tracking points. We'll click here and scale it up. That's number 4. Let's see, here is number 5. That one may slip, it may not work. We'll use this here. This is going to be number 6. Let's use this guy here, number 7. And we'll put one over here. Number 8. So there's 8 points there. So I'm going to select them all. And over here, I'm going to press the track backwards button. So we can see it's lost this one already. So 2 of them are now no longer being tracked. And we didn't make great headway with them. So let's see if we can fix them individually. So we may have to replace these 2 here. But let's start with this guy here, and we'll track them. So this goes to here, so frame 919. So I'm just going to use the keys here. So frame 920, so 919 and 918, it's gone. So I'm going to go G and place this back to where I think it should be. And then I'm going to continue the track, but it's only going to track this one point, so it should be nice and quick. And I didn't do that, so it's actually tracking more than one point, which is why it's so slow, and then it's failed with that one. Okay, so let's go back to, I'm going to go A to deselect, and I'll just select this guy. There we are. So again, we're just going to move in and manually fix where it's broken. So it's tracking here and here, but then it's gone. So it's kind of, yeah. So this is the point where I want to place it. So on this frame here, I'm going to go G, place it there, and then track further. Okay, so now this one track point here successfully tracks throughout my clip. So I had to do some minor tweaking to get it to work. So we'll select this one now. So for the from 940 all the way back to around here, it's working. So let's see if we can go in and tweak that. So then if you saw here, you can see there's a jump in it. So it's actually, so at that point there, that's a bad slip. So I'm going to go G, place this back onto the dark area, and then tell it to continue tracking. And then it's slipped at this frame here. So I'm going to reposition it and get it to continue on. Again, it's slipped again, so I go G, reposition it, and reposition. Okay, so now we have 2 that are working. So let's see if we can get this one to work. So this has worked. Again, this is, you can see here, it's actually slipped off the object after that frame. So in the previous frame we're here, and then we've jumped off. So I'm going to go G and reposition this on the dark area and get it to continue tracking. Again, it's slipped on this frame, so G, reposition, and continue tracking. G, I'm just going to go deselect, so it's just this one. Continue tracking. Whoa, some interesting jumps there. Okay, so that's okay, so that's not right. So I'll go G and place that there and keep tracking. So we need to reposition this one. And it's fine. So let's reposition that one. That one. So nearly there. And remember, our goal here is to have 8 tracking points. We'll press track backwards. Okay, so that's that. Okay, I think I should probably... I've kind of gone so far with this one that I'm going to finish it, but I think if any of the others pose this much of a problem, we'll just delete them and pick a different point to track. This is a good point to track because of its position on the beach. It's going to be close to where we want to place the character, but if the tracking point is not clear enough, then you can see it's only a couple of pixels in the difference. So yeah, there's going to be a bit of slippage with that. But anyway, so there's that one. That's 3. So let's work on this one. So where did we start with that? So again, it slipped off at that frame. So let's go try and fix that. So we'll go G, reposition it, and then track it backwards. Okay. And reposition, keep on tracking, and reposition it. Okay, so that was relatively speaking painless. We'll go back up here and select this guy here. So again, there's definitely a jump on that frame, so we're going to go G, reposition it, and then get it to track on. That's that one done. I'll pick this one. So I might just delete that one. I'll go with this one, so we'll have to add another one in, but that's okay. We said we'd actually delete both of these. I think these 2 points will be too difficult to work on. So we'll pick something else in a minute. So we've got as far as there. So let's go G, position that there, and then track backwards. And then we'll have to find 2 more positions, but there's plenty of opportunities to do that in the shot. So this is, if you looked at the other video of how to do this in Fusion, it is infinitely quicker and better than this tracking process, but the other one requires you to get Fusion, which is 300 quid. So this may be slightly more tedious, but it's also free. So we have 6 continuous tracks of varying quality, one might add, but they're there. So let's go to our last frame and pick slightly larger objects. So we'll put in, so we'll deselect everything, we'll put in one here, scale up the search area, we'll track this backwards. Position that there and track on. Okay, so that's that one done. So we have 7, and then we'll pick one more, which we will put. Well, let's just pick one here. Let's pick the end of this. So select that one, and we'll track that. G. Place that there. Well, that seems to have slipped. So we'll place that one there, and then we'll track on. And that's done. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 of these. Which is what we need to create a solve. So let's go to solve, and in order to solve we need to tell it what are the keyframes, and frame 1 and frame 30 aren't in this range, so if I try and solve it now it'll give me an error. So I'm going to put in, say, frame 180 and 920 as the 2 frames. Now why am I picking them? Well, because that's where we're sort of at, our perspective sort of shifts. We're kind of closer to being above them in the latter half of the video. So we'll try and solve for this. So let's solve, and it's giving me a solve error of 1.2. Now that is not a great solve error. We really want to solve error under 1, and how would I go about fixing that? Well, I could delete some of these and pick new ones, pick new places to track, or maybe retrack the points I have here, so that they don't move. I'd say this one here in particular is giving us lots of bad information. So that's how I would improve this number, but I'm actually just going to go with a solve of 1.22. Just means that our character might slip a little in the finished animation, but it doesn't mean that we can't proceed. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to tell Blender where is the ground. So I'm going to select these 3 points here and set this as the floor. I'm going to click this floor button. Now it'll only work with 3 tracking points, so that's the floor. And then I need to tell Blender where the origin is. So I'm going to select this tracking point here and say set as origin. So now this is like sort of 0, 0, 0 in my world. And then the final thing I want to do is set my scale. So very quickly I'm just going to click over here and see I'm in a setup to be metric already. So I'm going to select 2 points, and I'm going to try and kind of guess the distance between those 2 points. I would say the distance between those 2 is about 1.5 meters. So I'm going to put in 1.5 here, and I'm going to say set scale, and then apply scale. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is click on both of these. So set as background, and then set up tracking scene. And you may have seen stuff up here has appeared. So now I'm going to go out and go into my default setting. I'm also going to go File, Save As, and I'm just going to save this blend file because it may crash and we don't want that. So we'll call this robot walk 4. Now, so this looks really good actually, how it's set up. So I'm just going to hit my camera. I need to change the position of my robot, etc. But what looks good here is the position of the ground plane. So this plane here that Blender has added in automatically. And this is basically my shadow catcher. So I'm just going to go GZ and lift this up just a fraction. And it's being positioned at this origin point here, which is this the point I said was the origin. So that's really good. If the ground plane wasn't flush or level with the these markers, we would have to take this plane and rotate it so that it was kind of level with the ground. Okay, so we have that done. So what we want to do now is place, I'm going to take the skeleton of the character. I'm going to move it. I'm going to look through the camera here. Actually, before I do that, let's look from the side so that we're actually on this plane. I press S, scale it down, and G and positions. So let's see. So let's place this character firmly on this ground plane. So that just means that the shadow will be on this plane. So if there's a gap between the character and the ground plane, there'll be a gap between the character and its shadow, and we don't want that because it'll detract from the realism of it. So this is the positioning of the character. So now the animation that I've created actually is frames frame 1 to frame 250. So I'm going to take some of this animation and I'm going to shift it up to where we are, so 820 to 940. So I'm just going to go Shift D, so duplicate it, and move it up here. So 820 to, where's 940? There's 940. So I'm just going to take this last keyframe and go G and move it up here. Now that may not work terribly well. It might be a very slow step he's taken at the end. But what we're interested in is getting the character to animate into the scene. I'm not terribly interested if the animation is beautiful or perfect. So I'm going to take so I'm going to take the character and the ground plane and move them. So now that we've actually played the animation, you can see that they are not level with these empties. So let's make them. So I'm going to rotate the ground plane so it's level with the empties, and then I'm going to take my character and again reposition him so that he's level, or like that his mesh is level with the ground. So now when I scrub through, he's walking flush with the shadow plane, and that plane is level with this set of empties that has been created from this process. So let's kind of scrub through. So there he's walking along, and the rest of this is quite simple to what we have to do here. This is sort of we've completed the main part now of this exercise. So I'm just going to press, it's going to render. Now I haven't set up lights or anything, so it's going to render and see what we get. But we should see our character. Then the second pass it's going to do here is going to be for the shadow. So it's going to render the plane with the shadow on it. Now we haven't set up our lights, so I have no idea what the shadow will look like. Not terribly impressive. And then it will remove all of the white area, just retain the shadow information, and place that on top of the video background, or the particular frame that we're on, which is 941 in this instance. So that's my finished render. Now, what can we see? We can see that the ground plane is still slightly visible, which is not good. So let's have a quick look at what's going on. So we can go into the node editor and go to compositor. So I'm going to hit background and auto render. Now, oops. So what I'm going to do is, it says my backdrop here, so I'm going to zoom a little bit out, and I'm going to reposition my nodes here a little bit. Now, so I haven't made any of these nodes. Blender has created all of this for me. When I clicked on these two buttons here, or actually this one in particular, so set up tracking scene and set as backdrop. When I did that, all of these nodes were created in order to facilitate there being a shadow catcher and all these different render layers. So this render layer here is the shadow catcher layer. Its alpha channel is coming over here, and if I change the value here, for example, you can see that it's got darker, and we bring it to 1 and it's got much lighter. So I'm not sure if I can actually oh yeah, so you can see here I've got an AO, so it's an ambient occlusion pass. So I'm going to go here and turn off ambient occlusion, which will kind of give ambient light to all the objects in the scene. And then I'm going to press F12 and render again. Now this is about, so it's 120 frames long, so at the end of this we were not going to render the whole thing to show the result. I'll just play the one I made previously, but to say it'll be approximately the same. But this actually takes quite a bit of time, so if this is just one shot, which is 5 seconds long, the render time on this might be an hour or 20 minutes, or depending on the complexity of the scene and complexity of the lighting. Okay. Alright, so let's see if we can tweak this a little bit and make it look a bit better. So I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to go back to my 3D viewport. I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to take this side and go GX and move it off here to the left. And then I'm going to take that guy and that guy. But I'm going to go GY. It's going to move them into the kind of the shoreline and cheat a little bit. So if there's a slight discoloration, that is sort of hidden at the point where things are changing anyway. And the character will be on top of it, so it won't cut across the character. So I should probably fix that sort of problem with the alpha channel. But rather than doing that, I'm just going to reposition the shadow catcher layer. For now, I will go back and fix it. So, so that's our starting point here. So let's get our lights set up. So the main sort of source of light is this kind of top right hand corner. So I'm going to take my light here, I'm going to rotate it, place it behind the character, and I'm going to rotate it down so it's casting a shadow down onto this shadow area. And then here I'm going to add another lamp, a point lamp. Now I want this point lamp to be in front of the character, and it's not going to be terribly strong. So I'm going to take my skeleton here and select just the head, and then select the lamp. Shift select and go Control P and bone. So now this lamp is the child of the bone. So whenever the character moves, the lamp will move too. So it'll always illuminate the front of the character. Let's go to the lamp settings here, and we will go rendered. And you can see that this lamp here is way too bright. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase its physical size so that it's a more diffuse light, and then reduce the power from the light. And all that's really going to do is it's going to give me light on the front of the character. Then I'm going to go back to this light here, which is my sunlight, and do the opposite with this. I'm going to reduce its physical size so I get a better shadow from it. And so it's my shadow now. And I can increase its strength a little bit. Oh, not that much. About there. Okay, and I don't want a really hard shadow because that's going to make it look like there's literally a lamp behind the character. So I can increase the size of the lamp to give me an approximation of the character. Okay. And then if I didn't like the length of the shadow or its size, I can just reposition that lamp so if I rotate it a little bit here, you can see the shadow has moved. Okay, so let's save this scene, and then what we'll do is we'll just render out a single frame to see how it looks. So we're at 100 samples, which is about acceptable. Be a bit grainy, and we'll have a look at our finished product. So again, it'll render the character first, then it'll render the shadow catcher plane, and then it will pop the frame back in from the video in the background. Oh, I'm going to hit escape here. I think I may have hit animate and not render. So let's just hit render and get a single frame. And actually let's hit escape. Let's go back to where we were. So let's go back to frame. Yeah, so somewhere around there. Now, that's interesting. So you can see this through moving things. I have moved this plane, which is why the shadow is in an incorrect position. Okay, so that's much better. So if we go back to say frame 824, which is somewhere near the start of our video, we'll just save that there, and we will render this as a single frame as a sort of a proof of concept. And we'll put my mouse here at the base of the foot and see if the shadow is going to emerge from where the character is. Perfect. So we have 120 frames, and we can see, so this is so remaining 6 seconds, so it's about 30 seconds a frame. So you're looking at about half an hour to render just this one shot. Okay, so what it's showing me here is the foreground, and what I want is the composite, which is this here. So this is our finished render. So our character is standing on the beach. There is a shadow being cast across the beach from the character itself. There's sort of we've cheated sort of an ambient light by putting a light in front of the character. And if we were to render this out, it would take a lot longer, but we would get him walking across the beach. And if we go back to where we started, which is this piece of video here, you get sort of the idea, and you can see actually like there's a little kind of kick at the end, so the tracking isn't sufficient. And in this one here, you can see on the side here that the alpha channel hasn't completely disappeared. It's actually discolored the bottom of the beach to make it a tiny bit darker. But what I really need to do is either extend that plane so that it's a consistently darker area, same over here, or go back into the compositor and tweak the nodes so that this entirely disappears while leaving the shadow behind. Okay, so we're 35 minutes in, so I think we'll leave it at that for now. And this is what we're going to do in class, and hopefully get slightly better results when we put a bit more time into it.